All right, everyone. First of all, thank you, everyone, for inviting me. Especially thanks to Malin for giving me the opportunity to present. Uh, I'll be presenting just a very small guide to how to get started with GraphQL in iOS. So here is a little bit about me. My name is Mohammad Azam. I go by Azam. I'm an instructor. I teach full stack web development at a bootcamp called Digital Crafts. And I have a lot of different Udemy courses also about iOS development, like Acing and Await course also, and GraphQL and all that stuff. I have a few courses on LinkedIn. I've written a couple of books, and I have been speaking for some time now. So just jumping into there, GraphQL was developed by Facebook in around 2012. Now, GraphQL is not really a database or anything. GraphQL is more of a replacement for REST. And GraphQL uses something called a GraphQL query language, which you can use to either add, insert new items, or get the items that you want. All right. So the first and the biggest question is why GraphQL? Why just not use REST? And you can definitely use REST. There's nothing wrong with REST. GraphQL is just a different way of accessing data. So in REST, if you are trying to get, let's say, all the continents in the world, you will have a route or a URL for that continents. But what about if you want to get countries, all the countries in a particular continent? Then you have another route, which is going to where you will pass in the name of the continent, like Asia, and then you will get all the countries. Or you'll pass North America and South America and whatever, Australia, and you'll get all the countries. All right. So if you have another route where you want to get the languages of a country, then you will have another route. So in other words, you will have multiple routes or multiple endpoints for each of the thing that you request, each of the thing that you want. GraphQL is a bit different. In GraphQL, you only have one URL, whatever that might be. And whatever you're trying to get, you have to use something called a GraphQL query. So this is something that you'll have to learn in order to get stuff from the GraphQL or in order to add stuff to your database or some other database. So over here, instead of having 3 different routes or 5 different routes, we only have one particular route, which can be anything. And we are using the query to dictate that what we want. So in this case, we are saying that, hey, give us all the continents and the code of each continent, which is AF for Africa and maybe AS for Asia or something. And we are also saying that, hey, by the way, also give us the countries. And in the countries, give us the code and the capital and the emoji. And what the result that you get is this part, which is giving you all the different things. Now, this is obviously not like magic going on. The actual part, the server, you still have to implement it, which is going to go to the database and fetch all things. But on the client side, which is you can simply ask for these things and you will get all the things that you want. In GraphQL, there are 2 main concepts, query and a mutation. In today's talk, since it's just getting started, we're just going to look at query, which is simply meaning that you're just getting the data from GraphQL server. Mutation means that you're mutating, meaning you're changing the data. In other words, you're adding the data to a different server. So we're not going to look at that, but I will show you my own GraphQL server, which actually can perform mutation, and it's created in Node and uploaded on Heroku. And that's it. So that was the overview of kind of like GraphQL. Now, how do we use GraphQL in iOS? There is a Apollo framework available that you can use to hook up with GraphQL and work in your iOS application. Apollo has a lot of benefits. So you will not really be working with some other language. You'll be working with Swift or any other language that Apollo supports, and you'll be working with strongly typed schemas. So I'll show you how that actually works. You will also have caching support. So it means that if the data has not really changed, then you can cache those results and you will only get the cache entry if the things are not changing. And Apollo has also a very good ecosystem, so a lot of products and a lot of plugins are built on top of Apollo. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all the slides that I have. We are just going to jump in now to looking at GraphQL, all right? Now, I already have the app or part of the app built, and we are going to use the countries API, or displaying the continents and then displaying the countries. But before I even do that, I need to find out some sort of a URL or endpoint or a service that can give me GraphQL, or that is created using GraphQL. So I'm over here on countries.trevorblades.com, and that is a GraphQL API. Just like you have endpoint for REST, this is endpoint for a GraphQL API. It only has one link. That's it. One endpoint. All right. Now I'm going to try to see if I can write this code over here. Now, one of the good things about creating a GraphQL API, and I have not created this, I have a different API that I created. One of the great things about this is that the schema or the documentation is automatically created. So on the left, you can see schema and docs. So I can click on the schema and I can look at different types that are available for this particular countries Trevor Blades API. There's a continent, there is a country, I can see different properties of the country, there is a language, there is query, I can do all of these query. There is no mutation, I can't really add a country or I can't really add a continent because that's not really allowed with this API. But I can read through it and I can see, there are different things available. And I can also go to the documentation or docs and I can look at all the docs. And this is created automatically. I didn't have to write a single line of documentation code to create any of these things. And whenever you have a GraphQL API that is hosted somewhere on the web, whenever you go to that page, your page will automatically look like that. So that is pretty cool. Now, I want to get all the continents in the world. All right, so let's check out schema. Well, let's scroll down to queries, and these are all the things that I can query. And well, one of them is actually continents. So basically one of the questions is what creates the docs and schema and UI on the server. So when you are implementing GraphQL server side, then you have to create all of these types like query, language, country, continent, and so on. And using that, it actually automatically creates a schema for you. All right. And those types you have to create because those are the things that you're exposing. All right. So right now, I'm interested in getting all the continents. Just the continents. I'm not interested in the countries, but let's see how we can get all the continents. Everyone can see the font, or is it too small? It's good? Okay, I can only go a certain level up. All right, here we go. So query. Because I'm trying to get something. What are we trying to get? We're trying to get continents. What are we trying to get from the continent? Well, I don't know. I forgot. Let's go ahead and see what is available in the continent. Okay, do you want the code for the continent? There we go. Do you want the name of the continent? There we go. Yeah, actually that's pretty much what I wanted. Let's go ahead and run this query. And there we go. We got all the data. Continents, I got the code of the continent, AF for Africa, AN for Antarctica, Asia, Europe, North America, and the name of the continent. Actually, I forgot, I wanted to get the countries associated with each continent. I can also ask for countries. So based on whatever query that you're writing in GraphQL, you are going to get a JSON result back. So I'm going to say countries. I want the countries too. What do you want from the country? Well, I don't know. Let's go ahead and type. I want the code for the country. I want the name of the country. I want the flag for the country. I want the capital of the country. There we go. You got the countries. So each continent contains all of these different countries. And this list is obviously too long. because we are getting all the continents and all the country in each continent. So I'm just getting a lot of stuff. And the URL is same. I didn't go to a different URL to get continents and a different URL to get countries, or a different URL to get the states of each country. I can go ahead and get the states too, if that is what I want. Oops, not that. You can see most of these countries don't really have any states. But if I scroll down somewhere, you might see states. So using the same URL, we were able to get, based on our GraphQL query, we were able to tell this server that what we are interested in. But in the end, we decided we are actually not interested in most of the stuff. We're only interested in the continents, the name of the continent and the code of the continent. And that's it. Okay, so this is fine, but how does that work with your iOS application? I mean, this is all fine and we can check it out, but how would I integrate, or how would I even use this or hook up with my app with the GraphQL server? Now, the actual difficult part, or the time-consuming part, is the actual hookup of your iOS with the GraphQL or Apollo, basically. All right, the setting up part. All right, so I'm not going to show you or do the whole thing, but I'm going to show you what needs to be done. And I'll list some videos that you can watch to show in kind of like slow motion that what needs to be done. All right, and I'll also have a video on server side, meaning how can you create server of GraphQL in Node. Everyone can see the font size? Is that good? All right. So first thing you need to do is you need to add the package, the Swift Manager, Swift package for Apollo iOS. It is also available as CocoaPods, but I'm just going to use this one. So using this, and you are going to Swift packages, adding a package, you can take that package, put it right there and add it. That's going to add a framework for Apollo, which you can see right there. That's the first step. You have to do that in order to integrate Apollo with your application, either using CocoaPods, Cartridge, or Swift Package Manager. I went with Swift Package Manager. Okay, so what's the next step? Well, the next step is to download the schema. Your iOS application needs to find out what are the different types available in the GraphQL server or the GraphQL API. There are many different ways of downloading the schema, but I guess the easiest way would be to simply click on the download button and it will download the schema.json file. It's simply a JSON file and nothing more. Next, you will use a JSON file and you will add that JSON file into your application, which is right here. I've already done that. All right. And one of the other steps, one of the final steps you need to take is to add a build step. Now, these arrows are being made by something called Demo Pro. All right. So one of the other steps that you will have to do is to add a build step. And the reason that we are using the build step is that your build step is going to look into this or look at the schema.json file, and then it's going to construct the strongly type stuff for you, like strongly type classes and all those things, or structs. So we need to do that. So in order to do that, you have to go to the Xcode. You have to go to build phases. I'm actually already there. You can see that I've already added a build phase, which is called Generate Apollo GraphQL API. And this script that you see over here, well, actually all of this, it's available on the Apollo website. So it's not like something I had to write. I just have to copy paste it, and that's pretty much it. All right. Now, every time I build, it's going to look at the schema, and it is going to look at a file that I've already created, which is called graph or queries.graphql. Queries.graphql will contain the actual query. So if I open this up, don't worry about this one for now. Only look over here. This is the query that we wrote, right? To get all the continents. The only difference between this query and the query that we wrote over here is that this query is more of an anonymous. It doesn't really have any name. You see that? The name is missing over here. But in iOS or for Apollo, you have to put some sort of a name. And it's also good practice to put some sort of a name for your query so that if your query messed up and it throws an error, you can look at the name and find out what the error is. We are not talking about this query at all. We're talking about the top part. All right. So once we add the query and I build the application, which I'm building right now, it is going to create a file called api.swift or whatever name you want to suggest. This is an automatically generated file based on your query and based on your schema, and this will contain all the strongly typed stuff that you can use to use in SwiftUI. Every time you build your application, your queries will be translated to strongly typed schema in Swift, and it will generate this file basically. Don't mess around with this file, meaning this is automatically generated, so don't add any code in this file because it will be overwritten by the next time you run it. All right. So the only query that we are interested in right now is this one, which give us all the continents. Okay, so how do we use it? Well, I'm using SwiftUI and I have a screen over here which is called continent list screen right there. All the stuff is already kind of like done. I mean, from a display purposes, if I go ahead and run it, it's not going to display anything because we haven't really fetched anything. All right. So I'm using the MVVM design pattern to perform the fetch using GraphQL, get all the data, give it to the view as a view model, and then the view model can give it to the view and view can display it. So that part is not done. If I go to the continent list screen, you can see that my populate all continents is completely blank. There's nothing going on over here. So I have to do something to fetch the actual continents. For this, I've created the apollo.swift file, which only contains few lines of code. It's using the Apollo client and it's using the URL that you have already seen, and that will be the entry point. That is going to be the one that is going to be the fetching. So let's go ahead and use this. It's just few lines of code that we had to implement, and now I can use my network class to perform the actual fetching. So I'll go into my continent list screen and I will say network.shared.apollo. So now we are in the Apollo world, Apollo client. And Apollo client contains fetch function, and over here you can perform a GraphQL query. What's the name of the query that we implemented? Well, I guess we don't have any name over here, but let's say that if we did put a name, get all continents. And I've also added this query right over here, which is actually called get all continents. It's just a name. You have to provide the name or Apollo is not going to work. Whatever name you want. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my over here and just going to type get all continents, and there we go. That's the query. That's strongly typed. I can actually use this. This is going to give me a result. This is the same result pattern. Remember the result pattern which you can switch over, and it's going to give you different cases like success and a different case which is a failure or an error, right? When it is a successful case, then we can grab all the continents out of the result. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and probably say over here continents equals to GraphQL result.data.continents, and we will go ahead. Well, I don't really have to do that part, I guess. Let's see. Probably I can just unwrap it over here, hopefully. Let's see that. All right. So I'll get all the continents. I have the continents view model, which I need to assign it. So continents.map, and then the continent view model, which is somewhere over here. Let's go ahead and build it. Make sure that you are adding a weak reference. We still have to add the case for the failure, which is going to give an error if there is any error. And for error, I'm just going to go ahead and display it. All right. And there we go. That's it. That is going to allow you all to get all the continents. And actually, it might be a good idea to do this on the main thread, because this is a published property that you're assigning. So probably try to put this in a main thread. All right. And since this continents property is marked with publish, whenever we are going to set this property with the view model, continent view model, then it's going to give a notification to our view that, hey, you got to refresh yourself or whatever you want to do. So now I can go to my continent list screen. I already created the instance of continent list view model. The only thing I need to do is to call it. So let's go ahead and call this continent list view model dot populate all continents. And hopefully that will be enough to perform a call to GraphQL server, the one that you already saw, and give us some sort of a list of all the continents. So let me go ahead and run this. Okay, there we go. So we got all the continents. All right. Now, there's another requirement now. I don't know how much time we have, but there's another requirement that we need to get all the countries of the selected continent. And when we get the countries, we also want to get the states of the country. So America, US will have 50 states, and other countries will have different states, and so on. Well, first we have to construct the query. We don't know what query we have to write to get all the countries based on the name of the continent, and we also need to get the states. All right, so let's go ahead and construct a different query. Get countries by continent, passing in, we'll get to that later, I guess, passing in something. All right. So we want all the countries based on the continent. Let's start with Africa because it's AF, the code is AF. So I'm going to go ahead and say countries. And if I open countries, it already tells me that there is something, a filter that you can pass. Okay, let's pass in the filter. And I can filter using a continent. And from there are different things you can do. This is equal, or this is not equal is the next one, and regex is the next one. But I'm going to say equal, and the continent is equal to AF for Africa. And then what do we want to select? Well, I want to select from the countries, I want to select all of these different things. And I guess we already added the name, capital also. Do you want the states? We can go ahead and say the states also. We keep on saving it. Okay. If I run this, it looks like, let's see if it's giving us the correct result or not. Looks correct to me, yeah? These looks like all the different countries in Africa along with their states. But now the problem is it's tied up to Africa. And the only thing we can get is Africa. Well, in GraphQL, you can actually pass in variables. So in a function, I can go ahead and say, this will be my variable, which will be a code. I mean, obviously you can name it anything you want. And this is string, it's going to be the type string. And the bang over here basically suggesting that it has to be provided. So it's mandatory. So whatever you pass over here, the code for the continent, we can pass it right there. Well, great, but how do we test it out? How do I pass the code now? If I'm testing it out. If I try to run this, it says that code was not provided. For this, you'll have to look on the query variables section below and simply pass in using JavaScript. I'm sorry, JSON code. And what's the code? AF for Africa. And there we go. So that's Africa. I'm not sure what the code is for North America or something. Okay, I guess that was, well, whatever the code is for whichever code that I entered for that particular continent, I'm getting all the different countries of that particular continent. So it looks like that our code is working fine now. And this is the query that helped us do that. So I'm just going to copy this query and paste it in my queries.graphql, build my application. Whenever I build it, that build script is going to run, and it's going to spit out the api.swift file, which if you scroll down somewhere at the bottom, you will see your query also. Get countries by continent. And once we have that, it's strongly typed, we can start using it just like we were using it for getting all the continents. So now, if I go to continent list screen, you can see that if we, where are we over here? Oh, that's a different one, sorry. Continent list screen, there we go. So if you go to continent list screen, you can already see that if I click somewhere or tap somewhere on the list, it will take me to country list screen, and it's going to pass in the continent view model. So from there, I can go ahead and get the stuff. So if I go to country list view model, I can perhaps perform the fetch over here using the same network class, network.share.apollo.fetch. And one of the things you will see in this fetch, although we're not going to use it, but one of the things you will see is the cache policy. This is where you can implement caching if you want. If you think the continents are not going to change, why do it again and again? Just cache it. So I don't think continents are going to change anytime soon. So that is something you can cache. So we're going to fetch. Now, what's the name of our query? Get countries by continent query. Pass in the code. And there we go. We will pass in the code. This is again going to do the same thing. It's going to return you the result and all those things. So let me go ahead and see if I can simply be lazy and paste the code, because it's literally the same exact code that you will do to fetch all the countries. All the countries based on a continent. So let me just go ahead and see if this will work. All right. And this should hopefully give me all the different countries based on a continent code, AF for Africa, NA for something else, and AS for Asia. We're going to get all the countries. It's going to populate the view model, which I have created right there, and so on. So now if I go back to my country list screen, it might just work, because we may have, oh, this is the one. I just have to call the function now, country list view model dot populate country, and passing in the, well, I guess we are passing in the code, which is coming from continent.code. There we go. Yeah, Simran. Oh, I forgot to do the dispatch. So let's go over here. Yes, so you should have a dispatch over here. Dispatch queue.main.async. And let's put this code over here. There we go. Thanks. There we go. All right. Let's go ahead and run the application and see if we are able to display all the continents. And if we select a particular continent, is it going to allow us to view all the countries? I'm not sure if it's going to display us all the states. I don't know. I think I implemented it like that, but let's go ahead and see. All right, so we got all the continents. Let's go ahead and click on Africa. And here we go. And not only that it displays the countries, because I'm also fetching states, so I'm also displaying the states of that country. You can display it much nicer, but it's also displaying the states. So that's the Nigeria and so on. So if I go ahead and select a different country like North America, so there we go. So this is Canada, Costa Rica, Mexico, United States with all the states. And we're able to consume this API and we're able to display the continents. We're able to get all the different countries as well as the states of the country just by writing our GraphQL queries. So I think that is what makes GraphQL really powerful, that it's just one API and the only thing you have to do is to make sure that you're writing the correct GraphQL query and that is returning you the result that you desire. All right. All right, let me go back. And that's pretty much it. That's all the code that I have for you. Let's go back to over here. So the repository for this, you can take a screenshot or something. Let me see if I can post this over here. So on the chat, I posted the repository. That's the repository. It will have two branches. Go ahead and use the main branch. That will contain the final project or the final code. You can play around with it. Some of the resources, obviously GraphQL, GraphQL.org for learning about GraphQL, Apollo GraphQL for learning about Apollo. And there's another website called hasura.io, and they have a really nice course on Introduction to GraphQL, which you might be interested. I also have my separate course on Udemy for GraphQL, and I will give you a coupon in a second. If you are interested in learning more about how to create the GraphQL server, I actually have created a server, this is my server. I created this. Documentation, everything is already there. It's already created on its own. And this one is actually the one where you can add stuff to it. It has mutations also. And it was very fun to write this in Node, Express, and deploy it to Heroku. All right. So if you're interested in learning more about GraphQL and especially setting up GraphQL, I would encourage you to watch the first video, Getting Started with GraphQL. If you're interested in creating your own GraphQL server in Node and Express and hosting it on Heroku, well, the hosting part is not covered, I guess, but this is the one that you can check it out. And if you're interested in the course, which will show you everything, then you can use this coupon and you can get the complete course for a very less price. So this is a GraphQL course, which is going to take you from knowing nothing about GraphQL and then creating or consuming different APIs and then creating your own API and publishing it on Heroku. So it covers all those different things. All right. And that is, could you post those resource links as chat? Resources, this one. Let's see if I can actually copy that. There we go. And that's pretty much it. If you want to contact me, you can follow me on Twitter at AzamSharp. And my email is azamsharp@gmail. And if you want to check out my different courses, just search on Udemy or search on Google, Mohammad Azam Udemy, and you'll see 20 plus courses, including SwiftUI and Async and Await and all those things. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for coming, and any questions?